Carol, break down the details. What do we know about the allegations? What exactly is under scrutiny?
Well, allegedly, this team of prosecutors is looking into whether or not Jerome Powell lied to Congress about the nature of the renovations of the Fed's Washington headquarters. You all may remember that this was a particularly embarrassing moment for Donald Trump when he tried to claim in a news conference with the Fed chairman that the costs for this were quite low, and Powell reminded him that actually it was different than what the president was saying. It was like a catch you moment where the president was being kind of schooled in real time on television by his own Fed chairman. But I stress allegedly, Anna, because the Fed chairman, according to our sources, is correct. This special projects team in the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., we've learned, has really been assigned to this in part because the president is angry with the Fed chairman and with the Fed for not doing exactly what he wants to do. It's a striking weaponization, there's really no other word for it, of the use of the incredible tools of the Department of Justice.
So, Barbara, how far is the leap then from investigation to an actual indictment?
Well, it can take some time because to actually get an indictment, you have to be able to convince at least a majority of grand jurors that there's probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed. So it may be that we don't get to that point. As we saw in the cases of Letitia James, where a grand jury rejected the evidence saying it did not amount to probable cause. But I submit that even being under investigation alone can be a torturous process for an individual. It can put them in a state of having to hire a lawyer, which costs financial resources. It can create stress for the person and their family. And Anna, importantly, after Watergate, the Department of Justice put in place some policies and guidelines to prevent the weaponization of these powerful tools. It requires what's known as predication. That is a good faith factual basis to believe that a crime has been committed. That is to prevent a fishing expedition just to see if you can dirty someone up because you don't like what they're doing. And so it's hard to see what that predication might be in this case, but of course, we don't know what we don't know.
Susan, we heard Powell point out that he has served under both Democratic and Republican administrations in the past without any political interference until now. What do you make of this moment and what we heard from the Fed chair?
Really quite extraordinary. The investigation and the Fed chairman's response to it. You know, presidents are often unhappy with the Fed, usually because they want them to lower interest rates and juice the economy before a re-election bid. That was the case with Nixon in 1972. He put some private pressure on Arthur Burns and the Fed chairman to lower interest rates. But we have never seen anything like this before in the United States, a public threat by an administration to prosecute and if he succeeded in prosecuting him, putting him in jail, the Fed chairman. This is entirely new ground for the United States. And I think that's one reason we've seen a response from some Republican office holders and definitely from the markets.
Ron, just this morning, speaking of the markets, former Fed Chair Janet Yellen told CNBC that this probe is extremely chilling for Fed independence. She added she's surprised the market isn't more concerned about this. Tell us more. How is this playing on Wall Street?
Well, not entirely well. I mean, again, stock market is having less of a response than the gold and silver market, which is very sensitive to the risk of inflation if the Fed is politicized in such a fashion that it lowers interest rates, expands economic activity, and fans the flames of inflation further. It's also concerned about the value of the dollar, which is why we see gold and silver going up to new record highs. And this, as was just stated, this is so unprecedented, and I know that's kind of a redundant way to say it, but in the history of the Federal Reserve, 113 years, there has never been an action like this, nor has there been a public rebuke by a Federal Reserve chair of a sitting president in the manner in which Jay Powell, I think, justifiably undertook. The independence of the Fed is critical to financial market function. If you look at countries that have politicized their central banks, Turkey, Argentina, other countries that have done this, they've seen higher rates of inflation, they've seen devaluations of their currencies, and there have been adverse economic consequences when there have been political motivations in setting interest rate policy, as opposed to, as Jay Powell himself said, analyzing the economy and making the best decision possible with the information at hand.
Yeah, there are economic consequences. There are also consequences when it comes to America's trust in the justice system in this country. Barbara, President Trump told NBC News he didn't know anything about the Justice Department subpoenas. I want to play some of what we heard this morning from the director of National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, when he was asked if he believes the president didn't have anything to do with this.
I think the president has been very vocal about what he thinks about interest rates. I don't think that there's any mystery about that. And so he has lots of frustration with what he views as the partisanship of the Fed. But this right here is a legal matter. And again, I've not been briefed on what the Justice Department is thinking. And I expect the president has not as well.
Barbara, the Justice Department has really transformed under this administration. After how much the president has attacked Powell, it's easy to be skeptical that he had no idea about this probe. How damaging is that?
It's really knocking down some of the important protections that were put in place in the post-Watergate era. There is a policy that prohibits prosecutors from talking with the White House about specific cases. And the purpose for that is to avoid either an actual or a perceived conflict of interest. In other words, we want Justice Department personnel to be making case decisions based on their independent judgment about what the law requires, not the political preferences of the president. And, you know, as to whether President Trump did or did not direct this or doesn't know about it, number one, you know, we know he has a loose relationship with the truth. So I'm not sure we should believe him when he says that. But even if he did not know about it, I'm reminded of the testimony of Michael Cohen before Congress when he said, Donald Trump speaks like a mob boss. He doesn't tell you exactly what to do. He speaks in code, but you know what his preferences are and you know what to do to please him. And so it may be that he didn't give specific directions, but those in the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. know that he doesn't like Jerome Powell, that he wants him out, and this is a convenient way to get him off stage.